Well, welcome everybody. I'm Danielle with Birdland Media Works, and I'm joined by Cindy Readnower of Skinny Leopard Media, and we are really excited to have an award-winning broadcaster, Graham Mack, with us today. And we're going to talk a little bit about the book, The Data Collectors, and we'll talk about his broadcasting career and maybe a little bit of his music career. So thank you for joining us.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here across the Atlantic. Isn't this cool that we can do this like this? You know, it's just, it's amazing. And this is the first time you and I have actually had a conversation, never mind met, because it was all done through email when we did the book. Yeah. But it's so lovely to be part of this and to actually know that you are a real person. And it's nice to meet you too as well, Cindy. We've only just this second, last couple of minutes just met. Yeah, but yeah.
So Graham, give us your background, give us how you got into audiobooks, and tell us about yourself, whatever you want to share.
Okay, which one do you want first, background or how I got into audiobooks? Because they're very different.
Background. Let's do
background
first.
Okay, well, I was born in Liverpool, which is a city you may have heard of in the northwest of England. And I grew up just outside Liverpool, 15 miles outside, a place called Great Sankey near Warrington. And it was a working class family, and my parents were very old-fashioned, kind of, you've got to get a trade and everything. But I was more, I wanted to be a photographer, or I wanted to be on the radio, and they kind of discouraged that. They weren't encouraging parents, and I ended up becoming an electrician apprentice, which wasn't me. And the people who hired me figured that out within 12 months and ended that little arrangement. So I ended up working at a plant hire place where they hire out, you know, machinery and tools. So my job consisted of cleaning dirt off rotavators and chipping cement out of the inside of cement mixer barrels after people had these things on hire. And my father was a hard hat construction worker, worked petrochemical plants, and he worked for most of my childhood. He worked away. Sometimes he'd be in the Middle East, you know, for 3 months at a time, and he'd be home for a week and then away for 3 months. But even when he was working in the UK, he'd be working in Wales, you know, a little way from us, and he would be only home on weekends and stuff. So he finally got offered a job that he could take his family with him to move to where the job was. So this was when I was 18, and the job was in New Zealand. It's the other side of the world.
That's where I'm moving to, depending on what happens with this election, just so you know.
Is it? You think
That's on my short list.
Yeah. So we all moved, my parents and my younger sister, who's 4 years younger. I was 18, and we moved to New Zealand. And I didn't have a career or anything. I'd been in this plant hire place. So I went down to the recruitment place, and I got hired on this same oil refinery construction site as what they called a trades assistant, a TA, which meant I basically worked on the end of a grinder preparing steel to be welded. Ooh. And I did that for a few months, and then the foreman came up to me and said, "How would you like to be a pipe fitter?" And this is an oil refinery, which is all pipes. And it's a big job. There was 2,000 men on the job at any one time. I say men because it was mostly men on the job at any one time. But as the 3 years of the project, there was 10,000 people worked on the site, as different trades were needed at different stages of the construction. So they needed pipe fitters, and they didn't have any in New Zealand because it's more of a farming country. So they were training up local people. And as I'd been hired locally, I was eligible to do. Anyway, they put me in this pipe school to train me to be a pipe fitter for 5.5 weeks. And 5.5 weeks later, they said, "Okay, you're a pipe fitter. Oh, and this guy's your TA." So now I've got a guy working for me, and I was a TA 5.5 weeks earlier. So, and I spent 3 years working on this construction site. My father was a supervisor on in a different area of the site, so I didn't have anything really to do with him at work. And after a few years, I was 21, they decided, my sister and my parents decided that they wanted to move back to the UK. And I really quite liked New Zealand, so I said, well, I want to stay. So I never actually left home. I was abandoned on the other side of the world. So they came back to the UK, and I went and found some lodgings with an old Scottish lady who just took people in as a lodger, and I lived there for a bit. Now, all my friends were in New Zealand, and then shortly after that I met my wife. She's still my wife. She wasn't my wife when I met her, obviously. I met her at a wedding that I wasn't invited to, but
We'll get back to that in a minute.
yeah. And so I met her, and then so we decided to get married. So then when I was 23, which is like 1987, we got married, and my parents came out from Britain for the wedding and everything, and then we got married, and after 3 years, this construction site had now become a fully functioning oil refinery, and I'd managed to get onto the maintenance side of it. I blagged my way with a contractor telling them I was a steam fitter. They were a company that looked after the maintenance of the heating, ventilating and air conditioning, and I told them I was a steam fitter, even though I'd only ever put pipes together. I didn't know what went inside them. So I was working with this contractor, and I found out that the guys who were the air conditioning guys were making more money. So I did the air conditioning apprenticeship by correspondence, and I managed to do the 4-year apprenticeship in 6 months because I just filled in the assignments, but then they wouldn't let me sit the exam. But anyway, I was working heating, ventilating, air conditioning, and my wife and I had lived in Australia for all this time. She'd been on holiday to Sydney once. New Zealand at the time. She'd been to Sydney on holiday once. I'd never been to Australia, and it's only like 3 hours away. So we went on holiday to Sydney, and we decided, let's just move to Sydney.
Wow.
So we put the house on the market, and about 6 weeks later we arrived in Sydney, didn't know anyone in Australia, not a soul. We arrived with a suitcase and a toolbox at the airport. I went through the yellow pages and found the adverts for air conditioning companies and rang them all up and got offered a couple of jobs, was offered a job, was given a van. Next minute we're living the Aussie dream in Australia. But after about a year of doing that, I decided that, what do I really want out of life? I'm like 26, 27, and I loved listening to the radio, always did. Julie, when we got married, found all these bits of paper that I'd had from England where I was working out different radio presenters I liked listening to at what times on what stations and where to find them. And, and all the time I'd been sending messages back to my friends in England. I wouldn't send them letters, I'd send them cassettes. I'd make little radio shows. This is, what I did. And I kind of realized listening to the radio, and I loved the talk radio in Sydney. They have a very vibrant talk radio thing. It's not like the US. It's not all Rush Limbaugh and right-wing wacko. It's more just a spirited conversation with Australians who love to talk. And so, and I liked that, and I decided I'd been in a ceiling space all day, and I was stinking hot, and there was fiberglass insulation down my back irritating me, and I'm listening to the guy on the radio, and I'm thinking, I'm in traffic. He's got no idea how to connect with the people who've had a pretty rubbish day like I'd had. And by the time I got home, I was so wound up, and I walked in the door and I said to Julie, I've had the radio on in the van, and I've worked out what I want to do. I want to be on the radio.
Wow.
And if she'd have said, just be quiet, wash your hands, your dinner's on the table, I would never have done it. But she said, yeah, I see that, go on then. And so when we didn't know anyone, we didn't know anyone in Australia, never mind anyone in radio. I had no background. So we had to work out how to do it from scratch, and I did a couple of community college courses where broken down old disc jockeys take money off you and teach you to read commercials. And then I did some community radio at a community radio station in Sydney for no money. And then I got frustrated because they have the Australian Film, Television and Radio School, which is the top radio school in Australia, and they only take 12 students a year for the course. Wow. It might have changed now, but they only and so the 6 months of it is them selecting these 12, and I didn't think I had a chance. But I got through. The first stage was you had to write a 1,000-word essay about yourself, and it had to be typed. Well, we didn't have a computer or a typewriter or anything. I'd never typed. I was an air conditioning engineer in high-rise buildings. So it got right down to the deadline, and I decided I'll just write it all out by hand. And it was a really sitting up at night with a 6-pack of beer, I used to drink then, and just writing about yourself and why you've come to this point that you should be, led on this course. And I finished it off, and the next morning Julie said to me, well, have you got this thing? I said, yeah, but it's not typed. It's just written out by hand. She took it into a place in town and got them to type it out.
Wow.
And then I put in the application, and then I got a letter back saying you're through the first stage of Australian Film, TV and Radio School. And I'm like, well, wow, that's pretty good. At least I can say I got through the first stage. And the next stage was you had to go to a commercial radio station and do a demo. And I went to a radio station called 2SM in North Sydney, which at the time was a country music station. And they gave me all these things to do, and I was terrible. And, I've got an English accent, and one of the commercials that you had to read was for the Fair Dinkum Aussie barbecue thing that really needed a proper Australian, it had been written for Australian bush kind of, thing. So I went through all this, I recorded it, and they took the reel-to-reel tape and were in the control room transferring it onto a cassette for me. And I'm talking to the guy there and whatever. And then after he gave me the cassette, he goes, there you go, send that to Afters, that's your demo. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. They don't send the demo. I've got the demo. And so because I'd been doing community radio, I had a little 4-track, a Tascam 4-track machine, and I still had a microphone from when I used to be in a band in New Zealand, but it wasn't a broadcast microphone. It was a Shure SM58. It was a stage microphone. It wasn't a proper, anyway. So I thought, well, I could send this in and I won't get on the Australian Film, TV and Radio course. I've got a choice. I can send this in or I can cheat. But these are my choices. I can if I get caught cheating, they won't take me, but if I send that in, I'm pretty sure they're not going to take me anyway. I've got nothing to lose. I'm going to cheat. And we lived on a main road, so I sat in the front room with a blanket over my head, this stage microphone, and I still had all the materials, all the copy for the commercials and the weather forecasts and all the rest of it. And I did them again perfect, and then I had this bloody barbecue thing to do. And what I did was I read it as an announcer, but in the bits that need an Australian, I just went, I can't remember the copy, but it was something to do with, the Fair Income Aussie Barbecue Company. Have they got the barbecue for you? And I just went into character whenever it just needed it, and carried on just in my normal voice. And I put it in and thought, oh, there we go. And then they said you're through to the final stage, and the final stage was an interview, and they had like 4 people just firing questions at you in like a horseshoe situation. And I can remember at one stage of it, because I was so determined to do this, I said to them, you know what? It doesn't matter if I don't get onto this course. And they all went like, they know this is the top course in Australia. I said, no, because I'm going to do this anyway. Whether I get on this course or not, you're not going to stop me. So you might as well have me on the course. This is
That could have gone really well or really badly.
Exactly. So then we were I'd always wanted to see Paul McCartney live. It's 1993. Paul McCartney's tour is coming to Australia. It's announced. It's at the Sydney Entertainment Centre, and we'd seen Eric Clapton and Billy Joel there before, and the Sydney Entertainment Centre is a vast arena, and we were right at the back, and it was not the experience I wanted. I said to Julia, if we're going to see Paul McCartney, we're not sitting at the back. We're going to queue up early in the morning when the tickets go on sale, and we're going to get some good seats. And so we were outside the ticket office, outside the State Theatre, which is where their ticket office was, and we'd been there since I think about 5 a.m. And I was in my work gear, ready to start work at like 8 o'clock when, in the city doing air conditioning. And what they did was they took the names of the first, I think, 20 people in the line and said, as soon as these go on sale, when the thing hits, we'll type yours in first and get it. So they'd already taken our names, so we knew we had a good chance of getting some good seats. And I had a mobile phone for work, but it was like a brick, the old cell phones.
Yeah.
And this thing rang while I've just found out I'm going to get good seats. and it was Australian Film, TV and Radio School, and they told me I'd got on the course.
Wow.
And it totally changed my life, because I knew without that a guy with my background would never get into radio. And then we got seats in row 14 at the Sydney Entertainment Centre.
It was your day.
Yeah, it was some day. And I went on the Australian Film, TV and Radio School with the other 11 people, and I came top. I aced it. Luckily, it was hard work. It was so much fun. It was the best time of my life. And then from that, the regional radio stations in Australia, they always look at the 12 that come out when they're looking, and they hired me to do breakfast 5 hours drive west of Sydney in the middle of nowhere, a little town called Parkes. And I went out there to Hits and Memories 2PK was the name of the radio station. And I was a professional broadcaster, and I just couldn't believe my luck. And I got some voiceover work in Sydney, which we did down the line from there. It was actually a Beatles promotion, and they wanted a Liverpool accent, and that was the start of it all. That's how it. So that's the background.
He was training for audiobooks even then, having to do all the character voices.
Yeah. So that was how it all started. That's the background.
Wow, great story. I mean, because it sounds like it was almost fated in a way, but yet you had to still put the work in, or else it would never have happened.
Yeah, I was very, very lucky for them to take me seriously with the wrong accent. There weren't people who sounded like me on the radio in Australia. They all sounded Australian, and they all had much deeper voices too. You know?
Really?
Yeah, they were all like, "This is." It'd be like Triple M, triples your music. Yeah, we triple your rock on. Triple M. And I sounded nothing like that. And yeah, but hey, I got away with it, and it went really well. And that was how I started.
I'm hearing the book The Alchemist, where there's a line in it where when you want something, the universe conspires with you. So you knew exactly what you wanted and set the intention. I mean, you had to put in that. It's an amazing story and quite inspiring.
The thing was for it, though, I think most of it was just that bloody mind of determination, because when I'd made my mind up I was going to do it, that nothing was going to stop me. And I knew there'd be stuff in the way. I thought, well, nothing's going to, after the Australian Film, TV and Radio School, no one's going to stop me. People can slow me down, but no one can stop me. It was like when I was at the community radio station, they made me do a course. And when I'd finished the course, I'd still never been on the air. And I said, well, now I want an air shift. And they said, well, no, we haven't got any slots, because this is all volunteers. It's all unemployed people and retired people running this radio station. So the format was heavy metal and jazz. So they had no slots. That you have to wait till somebody leaves till you can get like an hour a week on this community radio station in Sydney. Well, I took their schedule and I found out that they were off the air on a Saturday night, Sunday morning between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. And I just said to him, there's a slot, I'll go in there. Like, they weren't going to stop me, because I didn't care when I was on, and everyone else is doing an hour a week, and I've got like 4 hours every week to really get into it. And then I decided I wanted to take phone calls, because I really wanted the interaction of, I like talking to people, and, and they didn't have a phone system that went through the broadcast desk. You simply couldn't take phone calls to air on this radio station. So because I had all the tools out in the van in the back, and I'm there when no one else is in the building, I wired, while the songs were playing, and I'm playing CDs and vinyl records, while the songs are on, I'm under the desk with a screwdriver and a drill, running an extension line from the phone out in the office, and I ran an extension into the studio with a plug-in, and each week I would go in, and the first thing I did, I bought an answer machine, and I plug that in, and I'd say, you can call up, and people would leave messages, and then I'd take the cassette out of the machine and put it and play the messages on the air.
Oh, wow. I
found out I could use the answer phone as a speakerphone, and then I stuck the guest mic into the speaker, and now I'm doing live phone calls. And then before the morning would come, I'd have to hide it all away, and took it all away so that they didn't know. And somebody heard it one night and said, how are you taking phone calls? And they couldn't work out how I was doing it. It was because I just decided, well, look, I can ask them and they'll say no. And the cheating thing as well to get on the course, it's like I got to the point where no one is going to stop me doing this. And anything that gets in my way, I'm going to work a way around it or over it or through it. And that's really, I think, was the main thing that I just kept on going. Yeah, because I wasn't very good. It wasn't like I was bringing something to the meeting. It wasn't, I was just getting away with it,
I'm so glad you did that, because if had you not and you just followed down that path you were on, it wouldn't have been fulfilling.
It's weird because I was 27 and you hear like all these things. I think it's probably because the age of 30 was creeping up on me, and I was thinking, well, am I going to be fixing air conditioners forever? And the weird thing was that the company that I worked for, the first company I worked with was Eastaway Air Conditioning. The next one was Acre Engineering. And the guy who ran it, and this is such an Australian story, they call it the lucky country, because if you go there and you work really hard, things happen for you in Australia. Not the same in the UK, but they do. The Australians have an expression: you should always bite off more than you can chew, and then chew like baggery. And
really, wow.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And the boss of this company, it was only a small company, it was about 6 people work there, and his name was Rob, and he'd done really well out of it. They had the air conditioning maintenance contracts for all the schools south of the Sydney Harbour Bridge, all of the police stations, the courthouses. These were all government jobs. And in a business where you're a contractor like that, the hardest thing is getting paid. But when it's a government job, the 20th of the month, they pay the bill. And so over his life, he'd very craftily only taken on clients that he knew would pay, and pay regularly and pay well. So he had all these clients that he looked after their air conditioning. And he came into the office one day and he said to me, "Mate, I've decided I'm going to retire." I said, "Oh, Rob, right, what's happening to the business?" He said, "I'd like to give it to you." And I said, "Well, mate, I don't know anything about running a business, and surely this is worth something." He says, "Oh, yeah, you'll pay me for it. We'll work out a price." I said, "Rob, I haven't got any money." "Oh, mate, I'll loan you the money, and you can keep me on as a consultant for in case anything, gets stuck." He goes, "Put your wife in the office. Mate, your ship's coming, you're set for life." And at that time, I was about halfway through the process of applying to the Australian Film, TV and Radio School. And I said to him, "Rob, this would be lovely. I mean, I've only been in the country about a year and a half." I said, this would be lovely, but, I really want to get into broadcasting." He looked at me sideways and he said, "Mate, all right, let me know." And then on the day that I'd got into afters, I had to go and tell him. And I said, "Mate, it's a very generous offer, and I know you'd set me up for life here, but it's not really what I see myself doing for the rest of my life. I'd rather be broken on the radio than, comfortable and working doing this." And he went, "Mate, you're mad. You're bloody mad, mate." And he was wrong, because I've never regretted it, because I've had such an adventure in broadcasting. It's just been great, and adventure is the only way to describe it. The things I've done, the people I've met, the people I've interviewed, the situations I've been in, the doors it's opened, been amazing. So Rob was wrong on that one, but that's just the way things work out. I don't regret it at all.
That's wonderful. That's really wonderful that you followed your passion.
Yeah, I was very lucky, and so far so good.
So who's, and all the people you've interviewed, are there one or two people that stand out that you just really, really enjoyed talking to over the years?
Yeah, I did. I sat in with John Cleese in his office in Chelsea, and I sat with him for about an hour and a half and did an interview with him, and that was lovely, because he's always someone I've liked. And yeah, that was great. I talked to Alan Alda recently, actually, but that was over Zoom. But that was another
I listened to that. That was a great interview.
Yeah, he was so lovely. Yeah, so I've
the shoes, because I could have sent you shoes if that would have been helpful. tell us what was the shoe bit?
Well, yeah, when I was speaking to Alan, it wasn't long after I'd got into audiobook narrating, and I'd read his book. Before I knew I was going to interview him, I read his book because I like him. And in his book, he talks about how he manages to find the voice and the character when he's acting. And he would look down at the shoes. So whatever character he's playing, and that would often tell him how to play the character. And he even talks in his book that when he played Hawkeye Pierce, before they yelled action, he really didn't know how he was going to do him. And he looked at the army boots and the thing. And so I said to him, look, I'm doing audiobooks and I've got to do all these characters, but there are no shoes.
Arranged.
But he gave me another great tip. Was just think about the person who'll be listening to the book.
Yeah.
That's who you should really think about when you do an audiobook. And that is a great tip. And you've probably found that too. What's your tip, Danielle, when you do them?
Well, I most of mine has been educational and announcing. So it's just so actually I had intended on doing this book myself, and I played with some of the voices, but the way that you went in and out of character and the transitions, I don't have that down like you have that down. So to me, I always thought of an audiobook as just, telling a good story, but I didn't realize it could be like theater. I don't know. You probably didn't see my blog, so I'll just tell you real quick. But when I had you and some other people, I was listening to the auditions, and I had some very definite things in mind that I was listening for. And I was listening for, audio quality, obviously, just a general good speaking voice, the character development, and the comedic timing, because I think I'm hysterical, but not everybody else is going to. And just to give it a shot, they have to have that timing. And so I had John, my husband, listening with me, and yours came on, and you just had such a warm voice that I'm listening. You could have been talking about air conditioning units, and I would have followed you to the end. And he's like, hey, he's really good. He hits all your points. Oh, he's got the timing down. And I realized I wasn't auditioning you. I was just listening. So then I had to go back and listen again. And I'm like, that's it then. That's how I knew you were the person that was meant to do it. So, but
it was so when I did the audition piece, it was so nicely written, and the interaction between the characters and then the narrator, it was so easy to jump from one thing to the other and just make it flow. Some of the ones I auditioned for, I get about 4 or 5 lines in and I go, nah. Just, there's a lot of stuff out there that isn't that well written, but yours was really, really nice to do. And I didn't, until after the audition, I didn't have a real feel for what the book was about. It was only when I started doing the book properly, it was like, oh, this is really interesting to have these people coming here to collect this data. And yeah, that was it was a really good experience. It's been fun doing the books, but yours was really, really good. Yours is only the second science fiction one I've done. I did a time travel one a few months ago. Yours is only the second one of those. But I've actually, I now, when I go for the audition, I look for the science fiction ones because I had so much fun doing it. Because the characters, they can be, literally out of this world, giant salamander,
That was the hardest thing, and maybe we'll talk about this on the next interview when we talk about the book, but the hardest thing was getting out of my head, it doesn't have to be this world. It can be anything, and as long as you have it loosely based in truth, people will go with you.
Yeah. So if it's a good story and the characters have got, you can, empathize with the characters or hate the characters in some cases, because you got some nasty people in there. It all works, yeah.
So I'll ask one more question, then I'm going to shut up because Cindy probably wants to get a word in edgewise. I've been yapping the whole time. But what character, was there one that was particularly challenging to do, or were they all about even? The one I love is Ivan, because he's a Scotsman, and I love doing Scotsman. So I loved doing him. The ones I get the most nervous about are the Americans, because I'm not American. And I always think, does this sound phony to an American? So I stress out about doing Americans. I really do. And I do my best. I don't think they're perfect, but I get away with it. They're the ones so when Lucene was American, and Drake,
but Drake was New York. He's more New York American.
Yeah,
They're the ones.
Good thug voice.
What's that?
Good thug voice on.
You liked it? Oh, I'm glad it worked. I decided I was going to make all of the aliens English or British. So that's why the royals are like comedy versions of our current queen. And then the thug, he was from York, the salamander, their henchman. What was his name?
Oh, you're talking about Fredo.
Fredo, yeah. I made him Yorkshire. Because in Yorkshire, they're a bit hard, you know. They're a bit hard. Yorkshire, we don't mess about in Yorkshire, yeah. You know, and I wanted him to be hard, you know. So I made, and that's why Tanager is kind of posh. But yeah, I made them all the aliens, I made them British.
Danielle, did you tell him who Ivan is based on?
So Ivan, my husband, is not Scottish. He's actually Spanish descent, but he's Ivan pretty much. He's a caricature.
Oh, well, I hope I didn't insult him in any way.
No.
Because in fact, you didn't say he was Scottish. You said he was. I think your description was Viking.
Because I didn't know. I was really careful not to over define, because I didn't want you to even feel like you needed to do American voice or this voice. I just wanted to get the essence and see where it went. So so I just went with Viking. But he does not have that accent. But his character is based on him and some of Fatima. It's our interactions at home. Unless you knew us, you wouldn't know that we wrote ourselves. I wrote myself into the book. But when he was one of the test readers, and I said, just so you know, it's a caricature of you, you know, because I was worried.
Told him.
I thought I was going to, well, he would figure it out. And I thought I was going to offend him, but he was actually flattered. So.
Oh, that's nice.
No, I thought Ivan was my favorite, but of course I'm biased. So.
Well,
he was my favorite because I love doing Scotsman. Sorry, Cindy, what were you saying?
He's my favorite too because of the quirkiness of him and all the things he invents was just so interesting.
Yeah. But when I read it, I thought it said Scotsman to me. You know, he's got the beard and he's, you know, and the way he speaks and the things he's into. And yeah, he just said Scottish to me. It
worked.
So you didn't explain then how you actually got into audiobooks. So
okay.
Give us a little bit about that.
So I was working in radio for a long time in Australia, different radio stations. I went to bigger and bigger stations. I worked at 3 different ones in the end. And I'd moved back to Britain in 1997 because I found at the time that not sounding Australian was holding me back. And I thought, well, why the hell don't I come to Britain? I still sound British. And my wife kind of likes Britain. We managed, Julie's parents are Welsh, so she could get a British passport. So it wasn't, because she's a New Zealander, so it wasn't hard to, you know, we didn't need immigration or anything to sort that out. So we came back in. I worked for lots of different radio stations, and I became a program. There were 3 radio stations I worked at along the way, where I was also the program director in charge of programming, hiring and firing at the radio station. And I'd ended up at a station in London called Fix Radio, and I was the program director, and I was also on the air a little bit, but I was mainly the program director there. And it was a radio station for tradespeople, believe it or not, for people who were fixing air conditioning. So it was like the perfect thing. But the radio station had different ideas about the direction they went, and long story short, they let me go. And this was in February. So we went to New Zealand to visit Julie's parents. We went on holiday, which turned out to be a mistake because then COVID and lockdown hit and all that. So then I get back to Britain in like March. So I haven't got a job. And now all of a sudden with COVID, there are no radio jobs. And I had interviews set up with 3 different BBC radio stations. I had meetings booked in London. Everything got cancelled. No one would talk to me. Nobody wanted, because nobody knew where this was headed or what's going on. And I thought, I need to make a living now. And so there's a radio consultant in Los Angeles who I get on very well with. His name is Dan O'Day. He used to be on the air in Los Angeles. And he runs a course. He charges a lot of money for it. He runs a course on how to become an audiobook narrator. There are a lot of radio people, because we've all voiced commercials. In fact, at the small stations in Australia, most of what you do all day is voice commercials. Your air shift is like a small part of the job. That's often what you're hired for, and you have to be very, very good at doing characters quickly, reading things quickly. Otherwise, you're going to be there all day, and if you've just done a breakfast show, you just want to go home. So you get very good at producing from scratch, because you self-produce them, churning out these commercials for local advertisers. So Dan realized there's a lot of people with that kind of talent that would make good audiobook narrators and could do the production side of it as well. And so he runs this course, and I thought, well, I'm just going to have a go without Dan's course because I need to get this going. So that was in March, and I went on ACX and found out how it all worked, and did the first one was about soldiers in India in the 1800s. It was a series, and I got the second book in the series out of that one, and then I did that. And at the moment there are 10 audiobooks for sale, so I think I've done about 25, but there are a few that, and I'm working on 4 at the moment. I had an offer about half an hour ago, which I knocked back, but it's just been something that so this is my, what you would call a closet. So I bought these tiles off the internet and I put them up, and I bought a broadcast mic because I knew what I wanted. I bought a mixer and I got all set up, and I got hired to do, I now do a show. There's a radio station in London called Podcast Radio, which is a talk station that just plays podcasts. But I do a chart show, the Pod 20, and I count down the top 20 podcasts that week, and I interview the podcasters who are on the podcast as well. And I do that show from here too. And they pay me to do that, and I just send them the MP3. And so I've pitched out a couple of other radio show ideas, and I've pitched them out, and who knows, that might come of something. But in a very short period of time, I worked out I have to learn to earn a living from home. And so audiobooks is now most of my income now is through audiobooks. That's if you said like, you mean you could take the podcast radio show away and I'd still be fine with the audiobooks. So it's what I do now. So that was it, and I didn't know a thing about it, and I think I made a lot of mistakes at the beginning that I wouldn't have made if I'd taken Dan's course. But it's been great.
For the people that I contract with, it was trial and error, and I'm like, okay, the settings have to be here, and it has to be, and there was a lot of fighting with it. And like you, I started off like, this is well, maybe 6 months to a year now. But when I started off, we had a walk-in closet that I was just throwing moving blankets over and trying to pack it in as much as possible just to dampen the sound. And it is funny when the president of a company that, is working with you, you say, I hope you don't mind, but could you record in my closet?
Just another one of those things. It's like, no, I want to do this, and I enjoyed doing it, and I looked at it and how it all worked, and it was another one. I'm just determined. And you go on YouTube and you find out how to do the mastering and exactly how the setup needs to be with the filtering and the all the rest of it for it to meet the ACX standards and all that. So I worked it out pretty quickly, and there are people to help, and then it's just been so much fun because, sometimes I'll do like a business book and it'll be like quite interesting or not. And then other times I'll do something like, wild sci-fi with topless mermaids. Or a topless mermaid. There's one topless mermaid, wasn't there?
So do you have
In fact, she's not a mermaid. You just ask her. She's not a mermaid.
Do you read the book first before you start recording?
I skim through it and get a general idea, and then if there is a particular piece that I don't quite get, I'll read that out loud first, but only like a paragraph or a page, and then I go, okay, right, now I know this, now I know what's going, because you've got to know what it all means. You can't just read words off a page and hope it makes sense. You've got to... Mm-hmm. So no, I don't read the whole book. I'll skip through and see kind of where it heads, and if there's a particular character and you wonder where they end up, and you might need to know a little bit about that, but not really. No, I pretty much just start at one end and end up at the other.
You mentioned Odessa because I hear these characters in my head, which I know sounds mental, but when I was developing her character, I created all these people that I wanted to be friends with. The first draft, when I first started working out, these are all people that I wanted, that I liked, and they were perfect and polite. And I heard her in my head going, "You are so boring. Your characters are so boring. You know,
She turned on you.
You need to throw some more angst and like dysfunction." So I went back to each of the characters and actually thought, okay, in what way can I damage them?
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
It's funny though, the way the characters, do you think that she turned on you?
No, I never thought of her as the enemy.
Because I had a weird experience when I was doing your one with Ivan.
Uh-huh.
As you'll know, when I went through it, for some reason, the character Cepheus, now and again I pronounced it as Cephas, for no reason. And you'd pick them up and I had to go back in and drop in and get it right. It was, you know, and it's like, how can I, you know, all right, it's a name I'm not familiar with, but how can I suddenly change the name of the character? And I realized it was Ivan. Yeah. And I blame Ivan.
I almost told you that. I almost said, you know what, don't bother to change it on Ivan, but then you would have had to remember that Ivan was Cephas and Cepheus was everything.
No. But it was a mistake. It shouldn't have happened. I'm convinced, and I told my wife this, and she thinks I've gone mad. I said, no, Ivan got the guy's name wrong, and then after hearing it, I started reading it wrong too. And she went to me, Ivan isn't real.
Now
you got it wrong.
Say, guess what? He is real.
And to me, he was real. And I somehow, I think maybe subconsciously, I thought that Ivan is the kind of guy that would pronounce somebody's name wrong just because he's like that. And then when I heard it, I started doing it wrong too. Just because, so I think he turned on me a little, even though that does make me sound mentally ill.
I didn't want to confuse it because I almost shot you back a message and said, okay, keep it Cephas, but only with Ivan, because we had already gotten 3/4.
None of the other narration I got it wrong. None of the other characters got it wrong until he got it wrong, and then everybody else, and I didn't even know he was saying it wrong. and then everybody else, including me, started getting it wrong and not knowing we were doing it wrong.
In the time remaining, I know you've given us so much of your time. Do you want to touch on your music at all? Because you're a guitar player and a singer, aren't you?
Yeah, I when I went to New Zealand, when we emigrated to New Zealand, I thought I've always wanted to buy a guitar. I've always wanted to play guitar. I'll buy a guitar and take that with me. So I bought it was a copy of a Fender Stratocaster. It wasn't a real Fender Stratocaster, it was a copy of one. And so I brought it out, and it remained in my home, and I never touched it until my parents went back home. And something weird happened. When they left me in New Zealand, I suddenly realized, well, now it's me. And I always felt, you know, they were loving parents, I'm sure, but I always felt I was held back. And all these things all suddenly happened as soon as I could be me. I'm not a great guitar player. I'm an okay guitar player. But not long after I met, I was in a band in the UK that never really did any gigs called the Hubcaps. We were terrible. We wrote songs. We thought we were great. We were terrible. I was like 17. In New Zealand, Julie had a friend who was a guitar player and had been in bands, and he was kind of a new wave punk kind of guy. He's into the Clash and people like that. And there was a big ball for the hairdressers in the town, the hairdressers ball. And they were doing a thing to finish the night of it wasn't karaoke, they were singing live, but it was like tribute. It was like hairdressers dressed up as, there was a Tina Turner. There was a girl who was a hairdresser, and she dressed up like Tina Turner and did Simply the Best and whatever. And I can't remember the reason why, but me and Mike and a couple of other guys, and I don't know why we were going. Oh, no, Wheels, the bass player, knew a hairdresser or something. Anyway, long story short, we decided to do the Beatles. And I was going to be, and I had the hair back then, like that, and I was Beatle Paul, and we did this and played live, and it was fun. I think we only did like 3 tunes, but it went down really well. We did Twist and Shout, and we did Day Tripper for some reason. Anyway, one of the people there was one of the salespeople at the local radio station, funnily enough, but I wasn't in radio. And he came up to us afterwards and said, "That's really good. I think we could do this, and I'll be your manager." And we're like, "Wow, we've done 3 songs and now we've got a manager." And so he managed us, and we formed a group, and we called it Liverpool Direct, because I was from Liverpool. But the other 3 guys weren't. They were New Zealanders. So what we used to do is, while we could all sing, they were not allowed to talk. So I would introduce all the songs, and we were kind of conning people that we were from Liverpool on tour, and we did Beatles, but we did Beatles and Stones, and this was at a time when there was a TV show called Tour of Duty, so there was a lot of 60s music on the TV, and the 60s was still selling quite well this is the 80s. And it was like a thing, and we did the Who and the Rolling Stones and the Beatles and the Searchers and all that. And we wore the suits and the ties and whatever, and we did all right for that. With that, we made quite a bit of money at that for a few years, and then it ran its course, and I got married, and then there was a band in this is a town called Whangarei, New Zealand. And there was a band that had been around for ages, and they'd had many lineups, and they were called the Misfits, and they were they were the top band. And it was funny, when I first went there, I heard a band. I went to a club, and there was a band in a hall next to the club, and they were doing a version of Hippie Hippie Shake by Swingin' Blue Jeans, which was one of my favorite songs. And I had to go and check it out, and it was the Misfits and whatever. And their lead singer, something had happened. I think he went to jail, and I wanted to put Liverpool Direct back together, but with different musicians, because the ones I had got a bit sick of it, because they weren't into the music. I loved all that 60s stuff, but they were more, the drummer was into U2, the guitar player was into The Clash, and the bass player was into, who was it? The Cure. So it really wasn't working out, although I was into Beatles and stuff. I was happy with it. These guys, the Misfits, approached me and said, "Would you like to be our new lead singer?" I was like, wow. And the next minute, I'm in the top band in town, and that really took off, because we were on TV, we played on the telethon in New Zealand, and it went out national. We played live, and John Farnham, I don't know if you know John Farnham, Australian singer. Anyway, he was on the show as well, and he mimed, and we were live. Yeah, and we did, and that went really, really well. And I didn't actually even give that up until we moved from New Zealand to Australia, and I was an air conditioning engineer, because I was still, we were playing 3 nights a week in the band, but I was still going to the refinery and making, that money. It was terrible as well, because in the band you play the pubs and stuff, and you put like $5 on the door, and the bar takes the bar takings, because we'd pull a crowd, and we got $5 off everybody that came in, and we worked out we could play for 5 hours a night, no problem. We had 3 different shows, and we could play for 5 hours a night, because if you start early and you're taking $5 on the door, the pub may only hold like a couple of hundred people, but you might get 1,000 people through in 5 hours, as it turns over, as people only stay for an hour. $5 off each one of them. So then when you split the money up at the end of the night, and the terrible thing was all cash. And this, I know this is very wrong, but it was all cash. And I would have shoe boxes under the bed full of cash, because you couldn't put it in the bank, because then, the taxation would see the... because they had no idea how much we'd take on the door. So, yeah, crazy days, but good fun, yeah. And then I didn't do music for a long, long time, until about 2005, and I always liked blues, and so I put together a blues band, and I was working at a radio station in Bournemouth, and Mack Blues Band got going with some really good guys. I had a great harmonica player, Hugh Budden, and then I moved up to Teesside in the northeast, and I put 2 different Mack Blues bands together. One of them played, one of them had a stand-up bass, because blues is such a, spectrum. At one end you've got like blues rock, which is electric, and at the other end it's almost like jazz. So I had a guy, we had one lineup at stand-up bass and everything, semi-acoustic guitars, and the other one was all electric, so we do more Chicago, but depending on where we got the bookings. And then I worked for the BBC. I worked in Swindon. I did a breakfast talk show in Swindon, Wiltshire. And it was the first time I'd done really hard-hitting talk. I'd always been like a DJ, playing music and telling jokes and doing characters and fun and comedy. Well, this I was like a journalist. And so they got in the leader of the local council, and they were announcing a load of layoffs at the council, and he just got a pay rise and was on a 6-figure salary. And they said, you're going to interview him and you've got to challenge him about this. And so I went to town. He came in and I mauled him. I said, you know, these people who've got no jobs and you're sitting there on £120,000 a year, what have you got to say to these people? And, you know, really gave it to him big time. And then he got to the end of it, and you could see he was like, he's just been hammered by me, and he was like, you know, reeling from that. When I did my research, I found out that he was a guitar player. And his heroes were people like Thin Lizzy and Stevie Ray Vaughan and people I really liked. And so I said to him, I said, oh, thank you very much for coming in, Gavin, the leader of Swindon Borough Council, etc. I said, just before you go, it's a real like Columbo, one more thing. I said, you fancy yourself as a guitar player? Are you any good? And he went, you know, I think I'm okay. I said, oh, great. So I pulled out the electric guitar from under the bench. I said, just hold that for a minute. Plugged it into the amp that I had underneath the broadcast desk, stuck the mic in it. I said, let's see how good you are, and put him on the spot live on the air. Wow. And I've already just beaten him up. And and under pressure, he goes for it. And he was brilliant. Wow. And so, I mean, everyone's talking about this interview that takes this real twist, and he really was good. And so I said to him, I said afterwards off the air, I said, you know, we should form a band. And he said, what? He said, well, really? He said, you know, I'm the leader of the council and all that. I said, look, here's the deal. I work for the BBC, which is a public broadcaster. I'm not going to be allowed to charge money for gigs. Why don't we form a band and we only do gigs for charity? So we make no money ourselves. We just do it for fun. And he said, yeah, that could work. So he found a drummer and a bass player. I played rhythm guitar, he played lead, and we formed the Graham Mack Rock Band. And we would go and do gigs. And what we used to do, because we didn't want to take work away from working bands either, is we would find a gig that was on and a working band was booked, and we would open for them. But because I was on the radio and he was the leader of the council, we'd get all the publicity in the press that bring it in, and the money. And I think in the first year, I think it was about £30,000 we raised for local charities. All the money stayed local, and it was charity. And a lot of the charities would book us, and I'd say, yeah, well, you need to book a working band as well. Okay, and they booked the working band, and then it turned sometimes the working bands were supporting us, but at least they were getting the work. We weren't taking work off them, and it worked out great for a little while there. It wasn't until I got fired from that radio gig and I had to move again that wound up, and that was a lot of fun. I made no money, not a penny, and it was just great. And we did all rock covers, you know. We did All Right Now by Free and Come Together by the Beatles and that kind of stuff, and that was a real fun time. It was
I
really
find
good.
that amazing. You tore him apart, and then you're like, hey, let's start a band together, and then you helped him redeem himself, right? You're saying how greedy he was, and then he ended up doing all this great work for charity and finding work for other musicians. So you're helping him turn that whole thing around.
It was good fun. It was good patter as well, I could say. And, you know, because I'd introduce the band, and I'd say on lead guitar, the leader of Swindon Borough Council, Gavin. I give him a great round of applause. Or unless you've got problem with your bins or anything, he's the man to see. Sewerage.
It was so funny. I had it on my list of questions for one of us to ask you about, you know, like a life lessons that you from your career. And for some reason, the word sneaky keeps coming to mind, because throughout your story, I just find it funny, all these little ways that you kind of wove in opportunities, but that's not it. But that's when you're in local radio, you have to look for ways to sneak around. Like, for instance, if there's something going, you've got to get publicity for what you're doing. And I've moved around a lot, so I've had to go somewhere as a total unknown.
and have to get known as quickly as possible. So you have to be sneaky and pull tricks. It's like when I first moved to Bob FM, I was a program director and breakfast show presenter at Bob FM. It was when they had the Scottish referendum on independence for Scotland. So I just announced, right, we're banning Scottish music on this radio station. We're not playing anything by anybody Scottish. And it just went ballistic. I was interviewed on things in the US, and the Scottish Nationals threatened to firebomb the radio station and boycott advertisers and everything. All of a sudden I got known in the area.
I hope they like your Ivan.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, so you've just, that's part of it, is trying to always, find a way, because maybe there's something wrong with me. Maybe because I thought I was always held back. I've always thought, no, you're not going to stop me. So I try different things.
No, but that's good. I love your determination, because, and Cindy can attest to this, we've worked with so many people who were doing publicity for them, and they have all these grandiose of how it's going to be. They're going to be on Oprah and Dr. Phil and doing all this in a week. And when in 6 months it doesn't happen, they go on to the next thing. And they go through this cycle of, oh, that didn't work, let me try something else. And you just stuck with it. You adapted and you stuck with it. And to me, I think that's an important message for people. Like, if you stick with what you love, you'll get there. You just have to be willing to stay.
Yeah, but I never dreamed when I got into radio that I'd be doing audiobooks. And I absolutely love it. It's so much fun. You know, the best ones are the ones like yours with the characters and that, where it really is. You're just having fun, and you've got, and I think, oh, I'll try them this way, or I'll try them that way, and then that the author might go, no, that's not right. And I had that with one. It was the last sci-fi one I did. It was with Time Leap, and it was the main character's girlfriend. And after the 15-minute check, the author said, no, you haven't got her right. That's and I changed it, and then he was fine. But what's the big deal? You just change it. It's not like you have to go back and do a load of work again or something. It's not like you've just, the air conditioning that you fixed yesterday isn't working now. Come and fix it properly. It's not like that, because that's real stress, because you can't charge for a callback.
Well, don't get too, I want you to be busy, but don't get too busy, because I've got 2 more in the series coming.
I'd love to do them. I'd love to do them. If you like the first
book, you'll really like the second one, because now I'm like 90% of the way through the second one thinking, the first one was okay, but this one's really good. Now I know what I'm doing. So
yeah, because you've got the characters all set up now, and now it's about putting them in different situations and see how they cope and see how they react.
Yeah, so push them a little bit more. So hopefully
see what they can take.
Exactly. Hopefully November. So
November. Oh, cool. So in time for Christmas then.
I'm hoping. We'll see. And I'll rely on Cindy for actually putting the manuscripts, and so she's been instrumental in actually publishing both the ebook and the print versions. So
right, I see.
That side, and you doing the audio. So depending on your availability and Cindy's availability, probably before Christmas.
And what's your background, Cindy? How did you get involved in the crazy world of books?
Well, about 8 years ago, I had just closed 2 restaurants I owned. And I met someone who said, I've written a book and I don't know what to do with it. And I said, wow, I've always wanted to be a book publisher. And they said, well, you go learn what you need to learn. I'll be waiting, and I'll be your first client. And she was, and that's what started. And she ended up doing 6 books with me. And then I've just, a lot of my clients come back. I just published the 7th book for an 80-year-old man that he writes for kids, and it's all referral business. So wow. So just another story of opportunity and going for it. Yeah.
And if you need a voice, I know a guy for like it.
When are you going to do a character though, Danielle? When are you going to be part of it? You should write in a character that you can do, and I'll leave gaps, and then you put them in.
Oh, I like that, Danielle.
There you go.
You would co-narrate something?
Yeah, why not?
Oh, that is awesome. What a great idea.
That could be fun.
and this time around, my work schedule got so crazy, so it wasn't feasible. But I actually thought, I'm like, wouldn't it be cool to have like a male and female voices for an audiobook? I will absolutely take you up on that if you're not crazy busy when the time comes.
I'm doing one now that could really need that, but it's finished now. And the one I'm doing, it's a romance novel, and there's a guy and there's a girl, and I have to play both parts. It does like one chapter of the guy and one chapter of the girl, but obviously they're both in it because they talk to each other within their chapters. And I looked at it, I mean, I've done it, but I always thought that why didn't they just get a female narrator to do the girl parts? Because I'm not a girl.
Danielle, when we have done our courses, we do a lot of things with meditations and mindfulness, and Danielle is always the voice that does the meditations because she has such a beautiful voice. So when she initially said she was going to hire someone, my first thought was, oh, Danielle, you have the beautiful voice, don't waste it. But I love your voice too, Graham, so everything is great. But
it's the yoga voice. It's the yoga. People laugh at me. So I taught yoga for 18 years. And when you go in, you're all boisterous. But then, when you're ready to teach yoga, then you go into the yoga voice. So.
The calm voice.
So Cindy just likes the yoga voice.
You could have been the yoga teacher in your book.
Well, you'll come to...
Mind you, you die. Oh, I don't want to give that away.
Or does she?
Ah.
That's right, or does she?